I think it's important to live life by design and not by default. When someone is struggling in life, we have to progressively shorten the time frame. There's a quote I love that says, "No one was ever crushed under the burden of a single day." Only when regret about yesterday and fears about tomorrow are piled on top does today become unmanageable. Exercise is huge for brain health. There's a ton of research on that. If you're not physically active, the easiest place to start is with exercise snacks.
I think that Alzheimer's and treating with people with dementia and Alzheimer's is the ultimate example of meeting someone where they are.
I had a broken ankle. People saw me coming on crutches and they...
Welcome back to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here by now. I love having the most honest, real, raw conversations with some of the most impactful and influential people on this planet. I start almost every show telling you guys that, reminding you what the show is all about, because what typically follows is a real conversation that's tangible, accessible, and relatable to each and every one of you. And our guest today is a absolute rock star. He has become one of my favorite humans in the course of the last 6 months, even though I just met him and I have not spent that much time with him. But the reason is because his presence is very real. He has an intellect and a capacity for knowledge and accessing and repurposing and discussing that knowledge in a way that is really beautiful to witness. His heart is grounded, it's accessible, and he is always looking to connect in an authentic and real way. He asks inquisitive questions. He is always learning. He's an explorer, but he is also a big supporter in just all of the people that he believes in. I described this because witnessing how he moves in rooms has been a pleasure. And in the times that I've gotten to go deeper with him, it's always connected, real, raw, authentic. He's the CEO of A Mind for All Seasons. And I don't even want to simplify the description of this because I think the nature of our conversation will show it. But in the most simple way, it's to understand the importance of cognitive and mental function. The primary organ that drives everything that functions in our bodies, the way that we operate, drives and moves everything through us in terms of the brain health is everything. And Eric Collett, Dr. Eric Collett, runs this as the CEO of that organization, but he is so much more. And brother, I'm so excited to have you here today. I know you've been doing a lot of podcasts. You've been speaking. You've been expanding the work that you guys have been doing beyond your clinic and your practice now for a while. And it's awesome that I get to witness that.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. The conversation's already flipping my lid. I just have to give you a shout out, Brian, because that was really the first time. I've done a lot of podcasts, but that is the first time that the podcast host has had the courage to just authentically give an intro off the cuff and say what they think. That totally impresses me. Thank you so much for your kind words. And I love the fact that none of that was scripted. That was just raw, like this whole conversation is going to be.
Yeah.
And I got to press you on one thing. I can't claim to be a doctor. I get mistaken
I
for
threw
a
that
doctor
in there.
a lot,
As soon as I said it, I was like, oh, shoot.
Thank you. That's a compliment, but I'm not, and I'm not going to pretend to be somebody that I'm not.
So whether you have a piece of paper or not, I can refer to you as doctor because I see you as very clinical with a solid bedside manner in the way that you operate. And so I say that with the greatest amount of respect because I really do believe that there's a level of care, but also this access to knowledge that allows you to really heal people, whether you've got the doctor title or not. And frankly, you've got a doctorate in the way that you live life and the education that you have. So thank you for both the compliment. I fully receive it. And I'm so happy that resonated with you. You know, I'll speak to that for 1 second because it's something that I hold very, very true for myself. When I started this show is that I wanted to only be able to speak to either what I could say about somebody based on my experiences or to find a way to embody or represent who I believe them to be based on the limited information I do. You said it to me before we started the interview. You're like, I knew this was going to be fun. It was going to be raw. It was going to be scripted. I don't pre-script questions. I don't do a ton of research. I even told you out of all of my episodes, I've never visited a single person's website. And that may offend some people when they hear that because it's not that I don't care about the research in them. It's just that I want to be so present and real with who's in front of me. And so thank you because I do that with my intro and I do that with my outro every single show because I feel like I've been on close to 1,000 podcasts now as a guest. And I don't say that with any ego. There are less than 20 that I had a host speak to something real, raw, authentic, or to who they believe me to be outside of reading a bio. 20 out of 1,000. And yet, I think you know this, presence and the way that we can use our words to tee someone else up is also one of the greatest ways to honor and respect them. I believe. So it's a little attempt I do to care about the people that I want to highlight, like you.
Yeah. Well, I love that you have the courage to lean into something like that. But I think there's a pretty profound lesson in that. And I'm just feeling this lesson coming up as I'm hearing you speaking, Brian. And that's that if you go to a website and you do a bunch of research, there on the one side, you learn a lot of things that allow you to perhaps ask certain types of questions. But you're also adopting a filter that somebody else has put out there into the world. And there's something beyond that filter. There's something behind that. Mm-hmm. And I think the surest way to get behind that is to get somebody talking and to genuinely listen. Mm-hmm. I think listening is by far the most active thing that any of us can do as humans. And most people go through life thinking that listening is a totally passive thing. They are not controlling their mental white space. And one of the keys to success in anything that we do is to really recognize that there are two conversations going on all the time. It doesn't take that much time to mentally process the words that we're hearing. And so it leaves all this white space to be thinking about other stuff. And one of the things that I admire most about the time that we've spent together is that I have always had the sense that you are absolutely locked in and that you use that mental white space to gift it to the other person and say, I'm going to use all of what I could be using to think about whatever's going on at home, whatever's going on in my business, my family. I'm just going to gift it to you and actually be fully present. And that doesn't happen without years of practice and genuine effort in the moment to literally say, I am going to do this for this other person. And as someone on the receiving end of that, it makes it all worthwhile. Even if no one listens to this podcast, that is such a gift that so few people receive that it means a lot when someone actually gives it. So thank you for that.
I'm going to say thank you again. And dude, I think I just need to have you be my Flava Flav and walk around with a big old clock and be my hype man, because I'm feeling really, really good about myself in the start of this show, bro. This is good. I feel amazing. So thank you for the gift of the reflections, especially from someone that I respect so much. Eric, leaning directly though into that intro, right? I described you based on who I believe you to be and the interactions and experiences that we have. But you know this because this is the only scripted question that I ask on both of my shows, which is outside of however I've introduced you and whatever I've said about you. Who are you in your own words?
Yeah, I love that question. And I've thought about it a lot. I think there's a lot of different ways that I could answer it. There are trite ways. There are ways that may be visible to other people. But as I've reflected on who am I and who have I always been throughout my life, the thing that comes up most for me is that I'm a lifelong learner. I was just born that way. When I was a little boy, I was curious about everything. I drove my parents crazy probably with all the questions that I asked. I was the kid that would go to school and I would want to know something and it bothered me if I couldn't figure it out. And I would keep asking questions until I did figure it out. And it gave me the confidence that regardless of what it is, given enough time and enough persistence, I can come to know that thing at a deep level to where I can use it. I can work with it. And I would go to school, I would learn these things, and I would come running home and I would burst through the door. And to my mother's eternal credit, she would just sit there and listen to me as I downloaded everything that I had learned and got to experience the joy of sharing it with somebody else. So I'm somebody that no matter what it is, if I'm learning and I get to share it with another human being who's asking for that and they want it and they're interested in it, that totally fills me up as a human. And that's all I need to have genuine joy in my life.
I really appreciate all of the ways that you answered that question. And what I sit with in this moment is a question that I would not have seen coming, but it's here right now. What do you believe are the core variables that allow people to learn?
I think there's a lot that could go into that, but at the core of learning, I think there has to be a hunger to know. I think you have to have a why. I think you need to see something that it's there in front of you. You can almost taste it. You know that there's more if you could just understand it at a deep level. And when you have the kind of hunger that a person who's starved for oxygen has just to breathe, then you really learn something at a deep level. And I think on top of that, I like the concept of a semantic tree. I don't know if you're familiar with sort of how Elon Musk learns or other people who are great learners. They really focus on the core concepts, and they recognize that most people are out dealing in the periphery. But if you think of learning as like a tree, what is the trunk and what are the roots? And then you can worry about what's off in the leaves. And I think that's a really important thing for anybody to recognize in terms of separating signal from noise in the world today. There is a whole ton of noise in the world today. And there's very little signal, and there's even less signal that's pertinent to an individual. And if they're not clear on what the root and the branch, the root and the trunk are in their life and in their pursuits, and what it is that they actually really need to know at a deep level to be successful in the things that they're pursuing, then it's difficult not to get caught up in all the peripheral things that are shiny objects that are super interesting and actually keep the algorithm just feeding you with stuff to scroll through. And at the end of it, they leave a person confusing busyness with productivity and with sort of mind candy for actual deep learning and thinking and making new connections.
So I really appreciate all aspects of how you answered that, up to and including even the Elon Musk example and really bringing it down to the roots and the trees. You actually answered my question exactly, probably as it was interpreted and as it was asked, but I want to go a little bit deeper, because all of what you suggested is I have to have an innate curiosity and desire, and I need to have a system or a framework of fundamentals that I can recognize I can apply to learning across any category. That's what I heard you say, which is exactly accurate, right? The truth of the matter is, though, those both can exist and yet learning might not. And so what has to happen between the curiosity and the system that actually puts someone into the flow and the pathway of learning?
Yeah, I think part of what you're asking, Brian, it really gets into my expertise of brain health. And it comes down to a hardware software kind of issue. So years ago, I was working with a business executive out of Atlanta that had reached out and said, man, I got brain fog and I'm exhausted every day and I'm having a hard time keeping up, I'm having a hard time remembering names at work, I'm having a hard time keeping up with the new information that's coming into my business. So he was having a learning problem and struggling with all of that. He was having a hard time being productive. And so we did a broad panel of blood work, and we looked at nutrients and hormones and inflammatory markers and genetics and metabolic factors, etc. And we had him do a cognitive test so that we could quantify things objectively, and used a really cool test that Stanford researchers developed 20 years ago, and it's been administered over 20 million times. So we've got all these data points to compare to, and now we've gone over this guy's brain with a fine-tooth comb, and we know what's working and what's not. We know what things are contributing to his current performance. And as we coached him through applying interventions, his cognitive scores went up, depending on the test, 20 to 30% in about 4 months. But the real game-changing insight that gets to your question is, I was having a conversation with this guy, and we were celebrating the fact that he had showed so much improvement. And he said something really profound. He said, Eric, I honestly thought that I needed to read David Allen's great book on productivity for the third time and just get serious about applying it. I thought I needed to go to another masterclass or another business group where I could learn from people that had figured out how to be productive, etc. And he had this long list of things that he could potentially do to solve all of his challenges. And he said, I now recognize that I just needed to get my processing speed up 30%, fix my focus and concentration issue, develop steadier energy. And I'm naturally getting literally twice as much stuff done in the day, and I'm remembering things.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, Eric, I had a hardware problem and I was treating everything like a software problem. And you know as well as I do what happens if you try to load new software on old hardware. And I think that's something that so many people are missing when it comes to learning and life and how to have an optimal experience with life. We are not focused enough on the hardware, on our actual brain health, and making sure that it functions as excellently as it possibly can, because then when we're loading all that software on and we're reading the books and we're going to the classes and we're trying to learn new things, it all just works better. The body works as designed when the pantry shelf is full, when we have all the right ingredients, when the conditions are optimal. So I think that is a fundamental condition that has to exist if people are going to learn and learn at a deep level and really be able to sit with things and make deep connections.
Yeah, I was hinting towards the nature of your business with that, because there truly needs to be those connecting fibers to make it all work. Right. Again, we were talking pre-show about how it's interesting how so many people don't prioritize brain health as being one of our number one assets, the thing that drives everything that operates in our body, the way that we think, the way that we move, like literally even our brains produce all of the frequencies that allow us to feel emotions and our subconscious minds. And it's all in this brain, this organ. Right. And it's fascinating because I've often said to people that everyone believes they're stuck because they have the wrong strategy and tactics. But they're never stuck because of the wrong strategy and tactics. Now, in my case, obviously, because of my area, it's obviously, I say, because of the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, environmental conditioning. However, all of those things shape brain health too. It shapes emotions in the same thing. Mm-hmm. So the point is we're saying one and the same thing. It's the pathway with which we go through to help people get clarity on it. I love the way that you're able to integrate science, reference specifics, give case studies, talk about just the concepts that drive it all, because it is real, and you have done deep study around this. I think I've asked you this before, but for the purposes of this show, I'm not sure that I know I haven't yet. Eric, there's a lot that shapes who we are and how we show up and the things that we care about and focus on. And yes, you're a lifelong learner, but a lifelong learner doesn't necessarily go into brain health specialty just because they're a lifelong learner. And so give us a little bit of a backdrop into your early days, your early story that got you either on this trajectory or whichever one put you here ultimately.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I look back, it's such a meandering path. I never could have predicted it. And I reflect on the time as a teenager when I was speaking to my mother, who, as you can tell, had a profound influence in my life, both my parents. And thankfully, they're still with us and they still influence me in very positive ways all the time. They're some of my biggest cheerleaders in life. But I was talking to my mom as a teenager and saying, Mom, I'm so frustrated because I don't know what to do with the rest of my life because I like so many different things. I just know that I love to learn and I want to help people. And she took a deep breath and she thought and she waited to see what would come up. And I give her a lot of credit for holding space and just sitting with it. And she looked at me, and I will never forget what she said, because she looked me square in the eye and she said, Eric, I honestly believe that the work that you will do that will change the world has not been invented yet. And you just need to keep learning, and you need to keep serving, and you need to look for opportunities and go where they lead you. And that was a profoundly impactful moment in my life. And at about the same time, I was in an advanced chemistry class and I had an opportunity to write a paper for a contest. And I decided, because I had seen elderly people with dementia in my life, I decided to write a paper on a theoretical cause of Alzheimer's disease. And so I went all in, I wrote that, I had my theory. And then I really didn't think much more about Alzheimer's disease as I was going through college. And I was originally going to be a reconstructive plastic surgeon, mainly because my next door neighbor did that. And I thought, oh, it combines art and science. And that's pretty cool. So I was pre-med, but I was studying music because I was trying to stand out from all the biology guys. And then there's a bunch of pivots between there and the fact that by the time I graduated from school, I stumbled onto a job in an assisted living community. First as a director of programming, and then I became an executive director. And as I started working with our residents and seeing the declines that they were going through and recognizing what neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's do to people, I started recognizing two things. Number one, I was in a laboratory to leverage everything that I learned in getting a communication degree and a psychology minor. And so I just started trying a bunch of stuff. And I developed a whole framework for how to interact with people that I still teach all over the country to healthcare professionals. I've taught it in 39 of the 50 states. And I honestly believe that if you know these 5 principles, they're game changing when you have to interact with someone that's living with dementia, but they're also 5 really impactful communication principles. So developed that. And I started saying, hey, I've got this laboratory to work in. And I wanted to get advanced training in Alzheimer's specifically, but there wasn't anything that I was finding that actually met what I wanted to learn in the way that I wanted to learn it and to go down the pathways that I thought were most interesting. So I just designed my own course of study. I started going to conferences. I started reading books. I started attending a lecture series that a skilled nursing facility across the street had on a monthly basis with their medical director. And I just started asking more and more questions. And fast forward to 9.5 years ago when I started A Mind for All Seasons, there's a whole story in what led to that and some of the pivots that we've taken since we started it. But when I joined forces with my business partner, who is the clinician on the team, he's our chief medical officer, Randy Vaudry, incredible human being. He sat down when we joined forces and he said, Eric, I know you didn't actually end up completing medical school, but I've got to put you through a crash course in med school. And if we're going to work together, we need to be intentional about this. So we literally spent over 3 years every Monday and Friday morning getting together at 7 a.m. with him teaching me, here's how you read labs. Here's stuff that you don't know about physiology. And he would give me cases and he'd say, okay, what do you see in this blood work? What stands out to you? And then we started doing master classes for our team as we grew. And so now for years, every Friday for an hour, we've gone deep in some aspect of medical research and science. And just through the course of doing all of that stuff, it's changed the way that I see the world. It's helped me understand things at a deep level. I can talk to neurologists and researchers and talk deep on the science of it because Randy helped me learn that. And I've learned it from a lot of other sources. So it's been a really wild ride and interesting experience to get to the point of understanding some of these things. But I'm so grateful for the way it's unfolded.
Yeah. And I mean, no surprise that I threw out the doctor term because again, I think it's almost like you need your honorary doctorate at this point. You know, I have to say though I realize that it's a regulated industry and I understand all the reasons why and all the enforcements for safety and protocols and patients, all of that is good. What I also say is that some of the best therapists don't actually have a psychology degree or a therapy license. Some of the best coaches don't have a coaching certification. Some of the best medical practitioners aren't doctors, right? So regardless of the fact of the title that's associated with it, the knowledge and the wisdom that you deploy it with is the difference. And that's, I think, where I extract that. Now, you did say something in there that, yes, I was asking about the deeper nuance of your business in that prior question. However, there's a critical piece that's also there in addition to those other 2 frameworks that I think you alluded to in this case as it related to your own learning and development. You asked a lot of questions and you consistently ask a lot of questions. There's a difference between just having curiosity and actually activating that curiosity by asking, right? Or formulating it into a pathway to learn within that system. And you've done that all the way through. You ask questions. You've done it with me. I've witnessed you do it in other rooms. And you are one of those people that I would suggest, unless you're being asked a question, it's more likely you're going to ask a question than make a statement.
Well, thank you for that compliment. I genuinely aspire to that. I think it's important to live life by design and not by default. Too many people go through life just in default mode. And the differentiator is when you choose to be intentional in how you approach life. And one of the lessons that I wish that I had learned when I was younger was to be super intentional about refining my questions. Yes. Both the questions that I'm asking myself and the questions that I'm asking others. So to your point, I actually think every single day about what questions do I need to ask today? When I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm not only I'm thinking before that conversation, what would be the most impactful questions that I could ask? But also as I'm having the conversation, I'm really thinking about how do I refine my questions? And I think that's one of the reasons why I immediately gravitated toward you when, we initially met at a conference and we were there live, because I saw you as a guy who was totally present, fully there in the moment, and asking himself questions in real time. I could tell that as you were on stage, you were literally thinking, what would serve this audience the best in this moment with what's coming up and how they're responding. And that's a phenomenally difficult thing to do. I know from my own experience that takes massive practice and a lot of focus and brain power. So I think that's one of the reasons why I knew this was going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's one of the things I think that you and I have been able to really easy relate on. I can, and the reason I wanted to bring it back to the question piece, and I'm happy that you put it into your answer there, is that's one of the things I respect about you is the way you craft questions and the curiosity with which you go about it. I've, like you, have worked on and have said for a long time, I'm only as good as my questions. Every day I'm asking questions, and I'm asking questions about my questions, not for the sake of nausea and spinning, but for the sake of forward movement and understanding, right? But it also goes to the original point that you complimented me on in terms of the presence that you expected to have here. And I'll give credit to 2 or 3 mentors of mine early in my 20s that they were the type of people that you could sit with and you would feel like you were the only person on the planet. And that was so profound for me. And when I looked back, even in those relationships, those people asked a lot of questions from a place of genuine curiosity. And they would teach through their questions so that it's not even having to be what is taught, but the person is connecting the dots themselves. And when I had the privilege of witnessing that, it made me feel like I was the only person in the world. And so it only reinforced the importance of me being with people, but that's also why I forced myself to not script questions. Because in my coaching work or in the work I do in any other capacity, if I can't be present to ask the questions that need to be asked right now, it doesn't matter how good my other questions are, is how I have viewed it for me. And so thank you for all of that. But I'm going to ground it also, and I'm going to ask you a very pointed and specific question that is actually way more tactical than anything else is going to be in this entire conversation, because you said it a minute ago. You said there are 5 things you've spoken in 39 states on these 5 principles that if everybody understood these 5 principles, it would help everyone, but every practitioner would be better in this area. So I'm going to ask you to give us a mini masterclass in as condensed a fashion as you see fitting for us to understand at least the components that we need to. But I want to hear these 5 pieces, because since you said that, I've been wanting to loop back and ask you exactly what they are.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to share it with you. And I'm going to give multiple ways for you and our audience to try to remember this, because in order for knowledge, and this gets back to the earlier conversation about learning. In order for something to go from episodic memory to semantic memory, from just being a moment in time to actually being able to work with it and engage with it, humans have to hear things different ways, usually 3 to 7 times. And so if I can present this information in multiple ways, it will make a bigger impact for people. They're more likely to remember it and actually be able to use it instead of just having it tied to this experience. So for starters, it's easier to remember things when you have an acronym. And I call these 5 principles the vital 5 pillars of effective interaction. So the word vital is a pretty easy word to remember. We check vital signs. These things are vitally important. And there are 5 letters. And the T is right in the middle. And I like that about this word because the principle that's in the middle is what everything else hinges on. The T is a reminder that in every interaction, we have to terminate the task trap. And the task trap is what happens when we go straight to the task and we fail to do the number one most important thing in every single human interaction, which is to connect with the other person in a meaningful way. Can you imagine, Brian, that, sometime after the show, you're minding your own business and you hear a knock at the door and you happen to be walking by the front door. And you open the door and there's a complete stranger and you say, "May I help you?" And they say, "Yeah, I just want to get a look inside." And they push right past you into your house. I mean, I know that they're not going to get very far. You're going to introduce them to Winchester and your dog, right? Things are going to get ugly. Nobody would ever do that to well, I guess some people would probably do that, but that's not how people behave. And yet, interpersonally, that's exactly what we do to a lot of people. And when it comes to the context of interacting with someone with a dementing illness, that's an even bigger problem because it's institutionalized. It's baked into everything. Think about a care plan, for example. Someone has advanced dementia. They live in a memory care or an assisted living or skilled nursing facility. You got this thing called a care plan that says whether they need assistance with bathing and dressing and toileting and medications, etc. And we're regulated by following that care plan. And if you follow it really well, then you deserve 5 gold stars. And if you don't follow it, there's civil monetary penalties, and it's a really big deal, and you might find yourself on the evening news. So you are motivated to do everything on that list of things, which actually motivates you to see the other person as an object to be acted upon and not as a person. And nobody likes to be treated as an object. If you kick an object, it'll go in whatever direction you kick it. But if you kick a person, they kick you back. And so people all the time will walk in the room of someone living with dementia who has no idea where they are because they can only remember things for a few seconds and the distant past. And they're just sitting there taking it in, living in that moment. And when you walk in and you go straight to the task of, I got to get this person ready for bed because I got 10 other people to get ready for bed. Well, that leads you to go through their closet looking for their pajamas. And meanwhile, they're sitting there and their experience is no different than if you or I were sitting in our room tonight, minding our own business, and some stranger showed up, started going through our stuff. Well, how well do you think that's going to go when we go over and we try to assist that person to get ready for bed? In their eyes, they're getting attacked. And really the problem is that we are falling into the task trap. Step 1 is to connect with the other person in a meaningful way. And if this was a masterclass on Alzheimer's disease and how to interact, we could talk about what your options are and how to do that, et cetera. And I won't go there, but you get the idea that first and foremost, when you make a connection with someone, then you can assist them with all sorts of different things. But I see this problem in marketing. I see this problem in business. People are so doggone focused on the task that they're just throwing it out there and they're not connecting with humans. So let me just pause there. Is there anything about that you want to talk more about before we move to the other 4?
I'll just reinforce it. I think it's what I really appreciate, and I believe this in my experience. I have shared with you that my grandmother has Alzheimer's, and so I've spent plenty of time in these facilities as well with her. And I've said often that I think my son, who is on the autism spectrum, can, there's a lot about the autism spectrum that can teach us all about anxiety in general, right? Like it's one of those things. But I think that Alzheimer's and treating with people with dementia and Alzheimer's is the ultimate example of meeting someone where they are. Because sometimes it's not in this reality, or it's 50 years ago, or it's right. And for us to not be in a caretaker role, but in a connection role is fundamental. And so I just wanted to acknowledge, I love what you're talking about, right? Terminate the task and connect. It is always the first piece. So I love how you started. Keep going, my friend.
Yeah. And you just said something that triggered a thought, Brian, and I don't know if I've ever fully connected this, but when someone is struggling in life, we have to progressively shorten the time frame. There's a quote I love that says, "No one was ever crushed under the burden of a single day. Only when regret about yesterday and fears about tomorrow are piled on top does today become unmanageable." And so when someone's struggling, sometimes we just need to focus on today and being present today and changing what we can change today. But when someone literally cannot remember things more than a few seconds because they are missing the body part that would allow them to do that, then we shorten the time frame even further. And that's a mistake I see family members make. Back in the day when I was running a memory care community, we would have residents that would have a wonderful morning. They'd go to the exercise class. They might hear a musician. We did a lot of cool stuff to influence people for good and to improve their lives. They could have had a great morning. And then literally 5 minutes before their family showed up to check on them at lunchtime, somebody ticked them off for whatever reason. Something happened. It was a negative interaction. And they're only remembering things in the immediate present. And so in the moment that their family walks on the stage, they're really upset, they're angry, they're distressed, and their family walks in with the wrong frame of reference because they remember what happened yesterday and the day before and everything. And so they walk in with this whole package of guilt, and they look at their loved one and they think, how could I do this to my dad? This is terrible. He's obviously miserable. And I had to work hard and coach people through the fact that you're actually just seeing the moment And your job and my job is to improve the moment, whatever it is. If it's a great moment, let's see if we can make it even better. If it's a really poor moment, let's connect with this person. Let's show some empathy, but then let's help them pivot to a better space. Yeah. And that concept of shortening the time frame based on the severity of the problem, I think is a real important thing in all of our lives.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, you brought me even down into some applicable elements of experiences I had with my grandmother where others were involved. And as you're talking about it again, it did bring something that's extremely resonant. The number of times that I've seen family members shame someone with dementia or Alzheimer's by constantly saying, we just talked about that 5 minutes ago. Don't you remember? Right. And in the early stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, many are aware that they're not remembering something, but they don't want to admit it, right? Before they're completely in a place where they don't really have that cognizant or that conscious ability to separate. And so it's like, well, you're keeping them in a shame pattern and saying that there's something wrong when they literally have something neurologically off that they can't help, right? It's real. But then the second piece to it is I can't tell you how many times I would walk in and the care staff would make a comment about how easy my grandma was around me. Now, fortunately, we had a special connection, and most of the time she remembered me, and still does, but not so much anymore. But the difference is I don't care if she remembers me because it's not about me, it's about her. One, and two, it doesn't matter where she's at. No different than what we were talking about before. If I just ask her questions about it, right? Like she's been 14. She's been 7 in experiences. She's been 30. She's asking about her twin brother. She's asking about her brother that died 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Things that like I could remind her and like her ex-husband who died, right? All these different things that it's like, well, I could remind her and be like, oh, well, don't you remember they died? But then they're re-experiencing that trauma when that's not even their reality. Right. And so for me, it was always just framing it in questions again, like, oh, interesting. And sometimes I'd call her grandma. Sometimes I'd call her Glennis, depending on how she was receiving me in that moment. Right. And so I think even to the point of this, though, like if we don't connect, nothing else matters. And yet I could get my grandma to talk, be lucid, open up, discuss things when she would shut down for other people. And it was simply because I think the questions that allowed her to just feel like I was engaging with her.
Yeah. You're actually describing, Brian, one of the other vital 5 pillars. Beautiful.
So I teed you up. There you go.
That's a great segue. You didn't even know you were doing it. And I'll just comment real quick and say that if I had a broken leg and I was in a full cast, and you happen to know that snow skiing is my absolute favorite sport, can you imagine how ludicrous it would be if you came up to me and said, Eric, it's all in your head. Take that stupid cast off. We're going to Sun Valley, man. We're going to go hit the slopes. You would never do that. Nobody would do that. And when I was in college and I had a broken ankle, people saw me coming on crutches and they opened the door for me. They offered to carry things if it looked like I was struggling. We as humans are pretty good about having empathy when we see a need like that. The problem with an illness like Alzheimer's disease or the problem with mental health challenges is that the physiological problems are on the inside. The cue is not visible. And we do and say stupid stuff. Like we tell the Alzheimer's patient, don't you remember? And if you did an MRI and you measured the volume of their hippocampi, which is like the librarian of the brain, kind of the memory control tower. If you measured that, I promise you it would measure in the 1st to the 15th percentile. They are missing most of that part of their body that would actually allow them to hang on to an idea. So it's not a matter of them not trying harder. They are literally missing a body part. And it's ridiculous for us to say, well, don't you remember? We just talked about that.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that if we're going to have genuine empathy for the person.
The irony in all of that, by the way, is I very personally have been on the receiving end of people who don't, or just are like, they just assume, and they're like, well, you can just do it, or you just blah, 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 or like, just do this. And it's like, well, I don't have a tricep. I can accommodate. And it's never, I've never been the I can't kind of person. But to your point exactly, like I literally can be, mine can be seen. Mm-hmm. And yet that's, well, you're like, oh, people are crazy. They would never do that. Yeah, they do all the time. Mm-hmm. Even to people with physical stuff all the time, right? They overlook what is actually right in front of them. And so I just wanted to reinforce that because the example you give, I'm like, you're right. We hope that empathy is there, but I can tell you firsthand, there are many times that was what created my lack of worth, my shame, my either the limitations or the expectations for me to perform as if I had 2 normal functioning arms. Either side, equally damaging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all it takes for people is to take a closer look and to think just a little bit more, just slow down. One of the most profound things that I do for family members or professionals, if they're serving someone with Alzheimer's disease, is to show them a picture of what the brain looks like in end stage Alzheimer's. And it's literally lost 50 to 70% of its mass. It looks like Swiss cheese. And the area where you normally would see the memory center is a great big crater.
Yeah.
And when people see that, it profoundly changes them. But anyway, we could talk about this all day. Let me come back to vital five pillars.
But yeah, we're good. Keep going.
So we talked about terminating the task trap, which is just central to everything. We have to connect with people first. But you were also making the point, Brian, that a lot of people with Alzheimer's are living at all sorts of different points along the timeline. People with Alzheimer's not only lose short-term memory, but they also progressively lose long-term memory. And you can think of long-term memory as kind of like an onion. It's in layers. And when the brain is downsizing, it's kind of like peeling away layers. But whatever the outer layer is still feels like current reality. Now, we have a lot of firsts between ages 15 and 30. First car, first date, first day on the job, etc. These are really impactful moments. And some memories are like super glue memories and others are like sticky notes. A sticky note memory is, what did you eat for breakfast 2 weeks ago today? Nobody can answer that unless they never eat breakfast or they always eat exactly the same thing. But the brain knows I don't need to hang on to that long term. So we're going to prune that little synaptic connection. We're going to make space for other stuff. But I can tell you vivid memories of what happened on my wedding day because my brain basically said, listen up, bucko, you better pay attention to this. This was a really important day. And we have more firsts between ages 15 and 30 than any other point in our lives. So it's common that people living with dementing illnesses like Alzheimer's will remember some of those key things. They remember the highlight reel from life, basically. And if I had a tool where I could wipe your brain clean of everything except the last few seconds and decades ago and earlier, it literally would put you in a position, Brian, of living life as if you're on stage in a perpetual improv act. And we can leverage that because I have learned that one of the most helpful things we can do if we're going to talk to someone with dementia is to say, hold up, I'm about to step on stage in an improv act. And the first rule of improv is you never say no. Whatever is real for that person, you roll with it. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to lie all the time. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that they say, but we need to go with it in a way. And we need to say things that are true in their world.
Yeah.
So, for example, I took care of a lady that we'll call Susan. And Susan, every day, I took care of her for 6 years in this memory care community that I ran for 7 years. And every day between 3 and 5 o'clock, this lady would get angry and upset and frustrated. She'd be saying, "Where's Steve? Has anyone seen Steve? Where's the phone? Can I call Steve? Can I walk to Lubkin Street from here?" Which, by the way, is a place that she lived as a teenager. So she's living far in the past. And Steve had died 30 years earlier. And your earlier comment was correct. Usually you don't want to tell somebody that their spouse died because they might relive the grief. One of her daughters actually tried to do it. And her daughter, Pam, gently explained that Daddy had passed 30 years ago. And Susan looked at her like she was insane and said, "I don't know what kind of a game you're playing. I saw your father this morning. He's fine. Where is he?" Now, she thought that she was in a hotel. If you don't know why she thought that, you go to your local memory care community. They kind of look like a hotel. So if that's the stage that we're on, then how the stage is set dictates how the action goes. So here's Susan, thinks she's on stage. Thinks she's in a hotel and her husband's supposed to be home to pick her up. So step one in the interaction when she's distressed is, well, we have to terminate the task trap. I've got to connect with her. So I'd walk up to her and play the role of the long lost friend. And all that requires is giving a little bit of social proof. Leverage the things that she's repeating. So I'd walk up to her and say, "Susan, it's so good to see you. I remember the first time I met you. Your daughter Pam invited me over to the house. Isn't it on Lubkin Street?" And that quick, bam, she'd say, "Oh, that's right. You know Pam." So now I'm a family friend. And then instantly it was, "Well, where's Steve? He's supposed to be here to pick me up." If you're lost, distressed, confused, upset, one of the most powerful things that I can do is hook your emotional burden and carry it for you.
Yeah.
And the number one way to do that, at least in dementia care, is you blame yourself. Get really good at throwing yourself under the bus. Because if it's my fault, she doesn't need to feel bad. And she'd say, have you seen Steve? And I'd say, oh, I am so sorry. I forgot to tell you. And she'd almost immediately start to calm down. What is it? And then I'd say, I would improvise. I'd be in that moment with her. And I would say what was absolutely true in her world. And what I knew about Steve's history is that he was a traveling salesman. He covered Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And it was totally normal that he'd call home and say, hey, I'm going to be an extra day. And so I'd just say what was true to her in that part of her life history. Steve called. He did. Yeah, he's been tied up on his sales route in Eugene, Oregon. And he has to stay one more day. He asked if he could spend another night with us. I told him it'd be okay. And I tell you, 9.9 times out of 10, Brian, her answer to that was the shoulders would come down. She'd take a deep breath and then exhale broadly. And she'd say, I am so glad I found you. I had no idea what was going on. Are you sure I can stay? Absolutely. He's already paid for the room, which is not blowing smoke. His pension was paying for the room, for crying out loud.
Love it.
So improvise and be in the moment. Now, the other three are pretty quick to talk about. We got limited time, but I'll go through them fast. We've talked about the I and the T in vital. Mm-hmm. What about the V? The V is a reminder to validate emotional experience.
Beautiful.
Whatever somebody's going through, we need to see emotion, in my opinion, as a physiological reality. I think it's ludicrous that we have a healthcare system and we have a mental healthcare system because we have feelings, because we have an experience. It gets filtered through our beliefs, our attitudes, our prior values, our values, our prior knowledge, our neuroanatomy, and it gets pumped out as this neurochemical hormonal thing called a feeling. That doesn't mean that we have to like it. It doesn't mean that it has to be what everyone else might experience in similar circumstances, but it is a reality, and it's a physiological reality. Mm. And you would appreciate it if people acknowledge that, hey, I'm missing a tricep in one arm, and that may change things for me. And we can have a conversation about what that means and how I can support you. Hey, people appreciate that, but darn it, when somebody is experiencing an emotion that most people don't like to go through, it's completely unhelpful when someone comes up and says, now just calm down. It's totally invalidating. Yep. So I think a lot of us go through life categorizing and judging emotion when what we ought to be doing is observing and labeling emotion. Mm. It's totally different to hold space for someone to be a human and to hold space for ourselves. So instead of saying, man, why am I so worked up? I shouldn't be upset. We need to observe and label. Oh, I'm gritting my teeth, or my shoulders are tense. I'm feeling anxious. What's going on here? Or you seem upset. Do you want to talk about it? That's completely different than saying, now just calm down. So validate emotional experience, improvise and be in the moment, terminate the task trap. A is accommodate sensory deficits, because a lot of people with dementing illnesses lose peripheral vision. They lose depth perception. They don't see things similar in color when they're next to each other. They don't process movement fluidly. There's a host of problems that develop with that, and we need to accommodate that. Their language skills deteriorate. Often, if they're a native English speaker, it's now like they're speaking English as a second language. We need to do the same kinds of things. Use simple words and phrases. Slow down. Use more nonverbal communication to get further. The L in vital is a reminder that life history is our most important tool, because it gives us two powerful things: context and identity. If we can understand how the past is informing the way that they're interpreting this improv stage that they're on, we have powerful insight, and we can leverage that. And when it comes to identity, we're always sunk when we treat the other person in a way inconsistent with how they see themselves. And it was Abraham Lincoln who said tact is the ability to describe others as they see themselves. So if I pull back a little bit, Brian, and I just really ask, okay, how do those 5 principles apply in every interaction? Well, I know you well enough to know you would totally agree that we get a lot further when we validate others' emotional experience and we hold space for them to just have the normal human experience of feeling, whatever that is. We may not have to improvise with everybody, even though we're largely just kind of making life up as we go. But darn it, we better be in the moment. We better get rid of our weapons of mass distraction, all these digital tools that are constantly yanking us around. And if we're with another human being, Let's be fully present as we talked about at the beginning. Let's use that extra mental white space and gift it to the other person and be fully locked in with them. Let's not go straight to the task. Let's build a connection with people first. That's going to make a difference. And even though we don't necessarily always interact with someone that has a sensory deficit, literally,
right,
we all see the world differently. And we get far further when we first seek to understand, then to be understood, as Stephen Covey once put it. When it comes to life history, giving us context and identity, it's really nice to know something about what another person has been through and to appreciate where some of their worldview might be coming from. And it's powerful when we recognize how they see themselves and we do something to support the best side of that and to help them lean into the best version of themselves. And we invite them courageously to maybe change some of the stories that they've been telling themselves in ways that aren't serving them as effectively. So I know that's a lot to unpack, but I hope that framework
it absolutely does. And I'm grateful that you look. Here's the thing: I don't always get into like specifics like that, but I knew and had a sense based on how you said it that it would be highly relevant and applicable far beyond even just brain health and Alzheimer's treatment. Right. I mean, it really is a masterclass on how to connect and actually have humanity and how to treat and show up and meet people where they are. Right. If you look at it in the most even basics, it's a beautiful example of what we would even hope or how we might even correlate acting childlike as an adult to a kid to meet them where they are, to accommodate. And yet even though this doesn't happen in every situation, because we all have our own shit, right? There's more likelihood for people to do that with a child that's unassuming, that is obvious that they're in development, than it is to have or apply that towards an adult with any perceived real or conscious or unconscious deficiency, whether it's brain health, Alzheimer's, dementia, or otherwise. But the understanding of each of those principles is applicable, and I'm grateful that you actually landed the plane for all of them. Now, I know we are on a tight timeline. In fact, we're like right up against it, and I would love to ask even more questions. And so I'm going to probably just ask you one targeted question as we wrap this interview for today, and I'm sure there will be others to follow. For anybody listening right now, if they were to take one actionable, tangible, either piece of information or knowledge, or something that they can put into action today to help them experience and understand the importance of brain health and how that correlates to the quality of their life, what is one actionable or tangible piece that you can close today with that everybody can do something with?
It's a great question. We always look at two broad categories when we're working with people to get their brains better. And we work with a lot of younger people too. I know we've been talking about Alzheimer's disease, but so many of my clients are business.
You work with a lot of high performers too, like people who are just looking to eke out, even though. So I know we had a heavy Alzheimer's focus, but thank you for playing with that. Anyway, sorry.
Absolutely. So there are two broad categories, and one is biomarkers, and there's so much stuff that's measurable. And probably the most impactful thing somebody could do is actually get blood work done and get help to interpret that. And that's something that we do. But if I really zero in on lifestyle factors that anybody can focus on, here's the short list of things that actually move the needle on brain health. And I invite you to listen to these things and pick one thing on the list that you are not as good at as everything else. And I promise if you focus on that one thing, it will absolutely change things for you. So here's the short list. Brain training, which means having novel cognitive experiences. It's not doing Sudoku and crosswords. It's actually new experiences, like do something with your non-dominant hand. Learn a language, travel, and don't use your GPS and form new mental maps. There's tons of stuff that we could add to that, but do some brain training, force new synaptic connections. Exercise is huge for brain health. There's a ton of research on that. If you're not physically active, the easiest place to start is with exercise snacks. If you're going to the gym in the morning and you're spending 30 to 45 minutes working out, that's awesome. I applaud that. Keep it up. But if you then sit the rest of the day, you're just an active couch potato. Once every hour to hour and a half, get up for 3 to 5 minutes and move. And there's endless possibilities of what you could do, but get your heart rate up a little bit. And that alone will be a game changer for you. Diet is huge. We could talk about diet for days, but leverage principles. Food is fuel. Whatever you're doing, you got to control sugars because elevated blood sugar is a disaster for the human body. And we don't even have time to get into that. But if you're looking for a place to start with your diet, eat real food. If it was created by a chemist instead of a cook, you got a problem. So eat real food. And there's another D that I'd throw on the list. That's dental health. Dental health is huge for brain health. Lots of people who die with neurodegenerative diseases are found to have P. gingivalis bacteria living in the brain. Your brain's a great big immune system, and anything that causes it to fire up is going to cause energy production to drop. And when that happens, you get cognitive or mental health symptoms, or both, or over time, neurodegenerative disease. So you got to take care of those teeth. It's critical for your brain. Sleep is huge. One 24-hour period without sufficient sleep, and it wrecks you, because sleep is when the brain takes out the trash. So if you're not getting 7 to 8 hours of good, deep, restful sleep, if you've never been screened for sleep apnea, take some action and make sure that your sleep is as good as you can possibly get it. One last factor would be stress management. And you can't change all of the stressful things that come up in your life. Sometimes we all get lifed on, but you can intentionally counterbalance. So if your stress is going up, ask yourself, what am I doing to counterbalance? What helps me better deal with this? Is it going for a walk? Is it breath work? For me, I play instruments. It grounds me. It centers me. There's all kinds of stuff we can do. But if stress is going up, you better intentionally counterbalance. So pick something off that list, whatever you're weakest at, go all in on that thing, and it's going to make a difference for you.
Eric, I will have all of your links to A Mind for All Seasons, some of the other things that you're doing, ways for people to access you, your knowledge and your wisdom in the show notes. I'm super grateful for you being here with us today. I know we're in a tight timeline, so I'm going to get us wrapped up here and rolling. I know we can keep going, but truly, I want to thank you for all of the love, all of the reflections, all the grace you gave to me, and for all of what you brought to this interview, and for what you do just day to day in the world. It matters, brother.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. Genuinely, I mean that.
Thank you, my friend. And for those of you that watched Eric flip open his lid and jump in, right? He even talked about it as a meandering path. But what I love is when life becomes your lab, and his ability to now work with some of the highest performers in the world to maximize and take and squeak out 20, 30, 40% more mental and cognitive function from already high performers is a byproduct of all of the years that he spent looking at the fundamentals of the deterioration and the patterns that lead to it, as well as all of the science that supports the way to feed our minds. But what Eric really talked about beyond just brain health is really about how to connect with people, how to have empathy and compassion, and how to meet them where they are. And if you took nothing else from today other than that one piece as a simple reminder, I promise you there's value there, but it required him to do the work so that he could help others do the work. And if you want to maximize your ability to show up in the world, connect, have more capacity, better regulation and nervous system, your ability to truly operate, retain information, and connect and speak in the ways that matter, brain health is one of the greatest investments you can make. And he gave you multiple ways to do so. Pick one and move it forward. I promise you, you can have the same freedom that exists on the other side, but it will cause you to have to flip open your lid and scan your can. We'll see you next time.
What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flippin' the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippinthelid.com. We'll see you there.